There is a divine law, higher, invisible, perfect, which governs all things seen and unseen. When you align with this law, miracles unfold with ease and grace. There is no struggle in spirit, no effort in the divine mind. Everything you give to God, God returns pressed down, shaken together, and running over. You are not at the mercy of chance or luck. You are guided by the infinite intelligence which knows your heart, your intentions, and your desires even before you speak them. When you give in faith, when you move in trust, when you act in obedience to the quiet whisper of the Spirit, you set into motion a current of blessing that must return to you multiplied. So many souls live in fear, doubt, or the prison of what appears to be lack. But appearances are deceptive. What you see with the outer eye is often the reverse of what is true in the spirit. The truth is that God's storehouse is infinite. The divine source is never exhausted. When you do something, not for personal glory, not for applause, not even for the reward, but for God, you step into a current that can only carry you higher. God requires no grand gestures. He sees the motive behind the smallest deed. You may give a kind word when it would be easier to be silent. You may forgive someone who hurt you deeply. You may choose peace instead of resentment. And when you do these things, not for your own sake, but because you trust in God's plan, you create a magnetic field around you, drawing in the blessings that already belong to you in the invisible. The subconscious mind is the servant of your spirit. What you impress upon it in faith will come into form, sometimes overnight, sometimes after a season of silence. But it must come. Your part is to believe, obey, and walk in love. God does not delay. It is only our doubt that creates delay. As soon as you release your action with pure intent, heaven begins its movement. Angels go before you. The crooked paths begin to straighten. The doors you thought were closed forever begin to creak open. What can you do for God? Only what the Spirit leads you to do. Not in force, but in flow. Not with fear, but with perfect peace. Maybe it is to speak the truth where there has been deceit. Maybe it is to stay silent when words would do more harm. Maybe it is to give when you feel you have little. Maybe it is to walk away from what is not yours. Whatever it is, the instruction will come. And when you obey that instruction with joy, you position yourself for divine reward. Not always in the form you expect, but always perfect, always overflowing, always timed exactly right. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. But when he sows unto spirit, unto divine love, unto obedience, unto truth, he reaps the miracle, he reaps the favor, he reaps the reward. Divine law rewards faith-driven action, not. This principle is not bound by human laws or by the logic of the material world. It exists above intellect, above effort, above striving. It is the unseen current that governs the affairs of those who have awakened to a deeper truth, that the power of spirit shapes the circumstances of our lives with precision, justice, and love. Divine law is perfect, and when we align ourselves with it, when our actions are driven by faith and trust in God, we tap into a system that cannot fail. You do not need to move mountains by your own strength. You need only act in the direction of divine guidance, and the mountain will be moved for you. Faith-driven action is not busy effort. It is not running around, trying to fix things in your own way. It is calm. It is directed. It is quiet obedience to the still, small voice within. It is hearing the whisper of God and stepping forward, even when nothing around you suggests that you should. It is taking one small act, one movement. Not because of what you see, but because of what you know in the unseen. When you act in faith, you are declaring with your whole being, I trust in the divine order. I trust in the invisible supply. I trust that even if I cannot see the results yet, God is already working. You are moving by inner conviction, not outer evidence. And this is what activates the law. It is the movement itself, born not from fear, not from force, but from a deep place of spiritual assurance. You are no longer pushing against the tide. You are flowing with the eternal rhythm of the universe. Faith-driven action may look simple to others. It may look like silence instead of speaking, or leaving a job, or walking into a room with peace when chaos surrounds you. It may look like giving something away when your own hands seem empty. But to the divine, it is a trumpet blast. It is the soul's way of saying, I believe. And in response, the entire universe reshapes itself around that belief. Because faith is substance. It is not imaginary. It is a force. It carries the blueprint of your desire and impresses it on the invisible matrix of reality. You can give endlessly, work endlessly, strive endlessly, and still see little result if you are not moving in faith. But when the smallest act is born from spiritual conviction, it carries power. It becomes magnetic. It becomes creative. Divine law responds to that kind of action because it is aligned with truth. The truth that all things are already complete in the invisible realm. That lack is illusion. That limitation is a shadow. That the kingdom of God is within you, and from that place flows all supply, all wisdom, all solutions. This is not the faith of desperation, hoping something will change. This is the faith that knows. That acts not to convince God, but because it is already convinced. It does not beg. It does not chase. It simply obeys. And in that obedience, it touches eternity. There is a divine pattern for your life, and when you move according to that pattern, you experience ease. Even in the face of adversity, there is a peace that comes with knowing you are doing what you were guided to do. There is no coincidence in the divine economy. Everything that appears in your life is connected to your inner state and your conscious or unconscious actions. When you align those actions with faith, when you choose to believe even when fear is tempting, when you move with God rather than against what appears, the law goes to work. People show up. Doors open. Delays dissolve. But it is not because you forced it. It is because you obeyed the principle. You gave God something to multiply. God does not reward effort for effort's sake. He rewards obedience to truth. And truth is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is often quiet, internal, soft. But it is always powerful. When your action is motivated by truth, by trust, it becomes the seed of miracle. It cannot be otherwise. Divine law has no loopholes. It cannot be tricked, it cannot be bribed, and it cannot be rushed, not. But it is unfailingly precise. It brings to you exactly what corresponds with your deepest convictions. And when those convictions are rooted in faith, the harvest must be abundant. Faith-driven action is sometimes misunderstood as passive. But it is anything but passive. It is courage in its highest form. It is stepping forward without the safety net. It is surrendering your timetable, your picture, your ego's ideas of how it should all look. It is doing the work even when there is no applause. It is following divine instruction, even when it leads you into the unknown. It is giving thanks before the result appears. It is walking around the walls of Jericho not once, but 7 times, because you were told to do so. It is easier to act out of panic. It is easier to hustle. It is easier to push with your own might. But those actions, though loud, lack creative power. They are not aligned. They are rooted in fear, in lack, in distrust. Divine law does not respond to fear. It responds to faith. It sees the motive. It weighs the heart. It knows why you did what you did, even if no one else does. And it rewards accordingly, not. There may be seasons where you are asked to do things that make no sense. To walk away from something that others think is valuable. To stay in a situation that seems uncomfortable. To wait when you want to run. To act when it would feel safer to remain still. But if you are led by the Spirit, that action is sacred. It is powerful. And it is never wasted. God does not forget. Divine law does not skip over the obedient. It counts every step taken in trust. This law works in silence. You may not see immediate proof. But rest assured, the moment you move in alignment, something begins to shift in the invisible. The pattern is being formed. The answer is being prepared. The blessing is on its way. The problem is unraveling. And it all begins not with big dramatic gestures, but with one act, done in faith. That is the point of origin. That is what sets the divine machine in motion. Not begging, not complaining, not bargaining, but believing. You may be called to give something of value when you feel like you have nothing. You may be called to release someone or something you thought you needed. You may be asked to bless someone who seems undeserving. You may be asked to stand still while others are rushing ahead. But your action, if driven by faith, is a deposit into your spiritual account. It is a sacred transaction. It is never ignored. Heaven records it. Divine law responds. And in time, the outer world must reflect the inner truth you chose to act upon. Intent matters more than appearance. This is a spiritual truth that governs the outcomes of all action. In the invisible realm, where divine law operates, it is not what you do that carries weight. It is why you do it. Appearances may fool people, impress crowds, or even deceive the self for a season, but they hold no power in the sight of God. The motive is the seed, and the motive determines the harvest. What you do outwardly may look right, generous, or holy, but if the intent behind the act is rooted in fear, ego, manipulation, or pride, the result will match that hidden root. There are those who give much but receive little in return, not because giving is unblessed, but because their giving is stained with resentment, with the desire to be noticed, or with the expectation of immediate reward. And there are others who give a small thing, a word, a gesture, a coin, but with such pure intent, such true trust in the divine flow, that heaven opens on their behalf. The invisible world reads energy, not form. It registers vibration, not volume. It responds to the content of the heart, not the content of the hand. You cannot fake sincerity in spirit. You cannot mask bitterness with polite behavior and expect divine law to respond as though you acted from love. The law is exact, and it sees beyond what is said or done into the very intention that gave birth to the action. This is why two people can do the same thing, say the same words, perform the same deed, but only one reaps the fruit of blessing, because one moved in truth, and the other in illusion. One followed the whisper of spirit, and the other followed the noise of the world. The motive behind an action creates its spiritual weight. An act done to impress is hollow. An act done to manipulate carries the vibration of control. An act done to escape guilt is stained with that guilt. But an act done in faith, in trust, in obedience to divine guidance, that act is alive with power. That act plants seeds in the invisible that must bear fruit, because it matches the frequency of divine flow. Intention is everything. The law is not tricked by masks. God is not mocked. What you truly intend, that is what the law will multiply. There is deep freedom in this truth. It frees you from the burden of performance, from the anxiety of appearances, from the need to be seen and approved. It allows you to move quietly, to do your part without fanfare, to live with integrity even when no one is watching. Because you know that what matters most is not how it looks to others, but how it feels in the soul. You become less concerned with outer validation and more committed to inner alignment. You begin to ask not, how will this be perceived? But, why am I doing this? This shift in focus transforms everything. It brings clarity to decisions, peace to your actions, and power to your words. You begin to sense when you are about to move from ego, and when you are about to move from spirit. You notice the difference between force and flow, between pleasing people and obeying God. And in this awareness, you become more accurate in your life. You become a truer instrument of divine will. You no longer waste time on empty gestures or surface-level obedience. You become rooted in essence. Intent speaks louder in spirit than words ever can. You may speak all the right affirmations, but if your heart is gripped with fear or envy or control, the vibration of your intent will cancel the power of your words. You may appear humble, but if you crave recognition, the law sees through the disguise. You may serve others endlessly, but if you do it from martyrdom or resentment, the service loses its spiritual weight. The divine economy is one of perfect balance. It gives to you according to the truth of your inner state, not the drama of your outer actions. It is not wrong to want recognition or reward, but when those desires drive the action, they distort the spiritual current. When you act only to receive, you place yourself in the realm of transaction, not transformation. But when your motive is love, obedience, or trust, the action is purified, and divine law responds not only to the act, but to the energy that birthed it. Intent is creative. It is a mold. It shapes the outcome long before the outcome takes form. The clearer and purer the intent, the more powerful the manifestation. You do not have to prove yourself to people when your intent is right. You do not have to justify your choices, explain your silence, or explain your giving. You can rest in the knowing that God sees the heart. You can move quietly in truth and let the results speak in due season. Because when intent is aligned with spirit, the fruits are inevitable. You cannot plant a seed of pure love, obedience, or trust without seeing a return in kind. It may not come through the source you expect. It may not come in the time you desire. But it must come. The law never fails. Intent is what separates the manipulator from the miracle worker. The manipulator acts to get, the miracle worker acts to give. One tries to force results, the other aligns with divine law. And the results tell the story. Where the motive is fear, confusion follows. Where the motive is love, peace unfolds. Where the motive is pride, resistance appears. Where the motive is faith, doors open. The invisible world arranges itself not according to what you do, but why you do it. Intent becomes the energetic signature of every action. It is the spiritual DNA that determines what is drawn back to you. And because divine law operates with absolute precision, you can trust that every action will return in alignment with its origin. This is not a cause for fear but a call to alignment. It is not a punishment system. It is a reflection system. It mirrors you. It reflects your energy, your honesty, your integrity. It cannot reflect what you pretend to be. It can only reflect what you truly are, what you truly mean, what you truly believe. You may be misunderstood by others. Your choices may be questioned. Your actions misread, your silence judged. But if your intent is clean, if your motives are rooted in truth, then you are in alignment with the law. And that alignment is more powerful than any misunderstanding. Time will vindicate the motive. Spirit will bring balance. You will be rewarded not for how things looked, but for what they were in essence. Because intent is the root from which everything grows. You do not have to broadcast your intentions when they are clean. They carry their own vibration. They speak into the field of the unseen. They send out a spiritual signal that the law cannot ignore. People may doubt you. They may accuse or question. But the law knows. God knows. Spirit knows. And when you stay anchored in that truth, you move through the world with quiet confidence. You do not need to prove or defend. You only need to stay aligned with your highest motive. When you act from truth, you are upheld by truth. When you move from spirit, spirit moves for you. When your motive is love, love returns to you multiplied. And when your heart is pure, the whole universe begins to conspire in your favor, not because of what you did, but because of why you did it. Obedience to spiritual guidance activates blessings. There is a current that flows from the divine into every life, a subtle yet unmistakable whisper of direction that emerges from within. It does not come through logic or fear, nor does it rely on outer conditions to make itself known. It speaks in silence, in intuition, in the inner nudge that says, "Go here," or "Wait there," or "Release this," even when everything in the outer world seems to contradict that message. Spiritual guidance is the voice of infinite intelligence communicating with the soul, and when one obeys that voice, regardless of what circumstances suggest, the pathway of blessing is unlocked. This obedience is not rooted in duty or religious fear. It is rooted in trust. It is born from the knowing that God sees what we cannot, that the divine plan is greater than the mind's agenda, and that timing, order, and alignment are all handled by a power far wiser than our own. Not. To obey spiritual guidance is to recognize that your inner instruction is not a random thought, but a divine directive. It is to treat the inner prompting with reverence, even when it makes no sense to the rational mind. This kind of obedience activates blessings because it brings you into harmony with your divine design. You stop trying to make life happen and begin allowing the highest good to unfold through you. Obedience does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it means not responding to something that once would have triggered you. Sometimes it means staying when you want to run, or letting go when you want to hold on. Sometimes it means taking one simple step without a clear picture of what comes next. But each of these steps, when directed by Spirit, carries a ripple effect far beyond what the human eye can see. Divine law operates with precision, and every time you follow divine instruction, no matter how small, it sets new forces in motion. It reorders your circumstances. It moves people, places, and opportunities into alignment with the path you were meant to walk. Blessings are not always the result of effort. They are often the result of alignment. And alignment comes through obedience. When you ignore the spiritual prompting, you delay the blessing. When you postpone the instruction, you block the flow. Not as a punishment, but as a reflection of your state, the universe waits for your agreement. It waits for your yes. And the moment you say yes, not just with words, but with action, you become a magnet to every good thing that was already prepared for you. The doors that seemed sealed begin to open. The confusion that lingered begins to dissolve. The provision that felt distant begins to find its way into your experience. Obedience may not make sense in the moment, but it always makes miracles. The instruction may feel inconvenient, uncomfortable, or uncertain, but its fruit is peace. The ego resists this kind of obedience because it wants proof, guarantees, and control. But Spirit does not offer those. Spirit offers truth, and truth requires surrender. To obey is to trust that what you are being led to do is not only for your good, but for the good of all involved. It is to believe that there is a divine choreography at work, and your one small step is part of a larger dance that only God can see in full. Some are waiting for blessings while ignoring the instruction. They pray for breakthroughs, but dismiss the quiet voice that tells them what to do next. They want a new season but resist releasing what no longer belongs in their life. They want healing but cling to bitterness. They want increase but avoid the small act of giving that Spirit has asked of them. Obedience is the bridge. It is the act of faith that says, I trust God more than I trust my fears. I trust the voice within more than the noise without. And when that bridge is crossed, the land of blessing is reached. The instruction may be unique to you. It may not make sense to anyone else. That is why it is spiritual. That is why it is sacred, not. It may involve doing something that others would never understand, but the reward is not in their understanding. It is in your alignment. Obedience connects you to the flow of divine timing. It places you in the right place at the right time, with the right people, doing the right thing. And when you are in that divine rhythm, what once felt hard becomes effortless. What once felt stuck begins to move. What once felt lost becomes clear. There is a blessing for every act of obedience. It may not be immediate, but it is certain. The instruction is never random. It always carries a purpose, even if that purpose is revealed only after the obedience is complete. Sometimes it is in hindsight that the beauty becomes visible, that moment when you realize, if I had not listened, I would have missed this. Those who walk with God learn to recognize that still, small voice. They learn to trust it above all else. And in doing so, they enter a life of divine flow, where struggle is replaced by synchronicity, and worry by wonder. The blessing that follows obedience is not always material. It may come as peace where there was once turmoil. It may come as strength to endure what once felt unbearable. It may come as clarity, opportunity, connection, or joy. But it always comes. God is not withholding. He is simply waiting for you to say yes. And the moment you do, the heavens begin to shift. What seemed impossible begins to unfold. Not through your striving, but through your surrender. Obedience is the currency of spiritual exchange. It is the way we say to God, I trust you more than I trust myself. This is why many who seem to have little in the outer world live rich, peaceful, miraculous lives. Because they obey, they listen, they follow, they trust. And the law rewards them, not because they earned it, but because they aligned with it. Obedience is not about perfection. It is not about never missing the mark. It is about willingness. It is about being humble enough to say, I don't know what's best. But God does. It is about being sensitive enough to recognize when Spirit is speaking and brave enough to respond, even when the response costs something. Every act of obedience strengthens your spiritual sensitivity. Every time you follow that voice, you become more attuned to it. You begin to recognize when it is speaking, when it is leading, and when it is warning. You become fluent in the language of Spirit. And this fluency opens doors that hard work could never open. It brings divine protection, favor, wisdom, and provision, not earned through performance, but granted through partnership. Because obedience is not a transaction. It is a relationship. It is how we walk with God in real time, trusting that His ways are higher, His vision broader, and His timing perfect. The instruction may be small. It may be to speak or to stay silent, to move forward or to wait, to release something or to pursue something. But the size of the instruction does not determine the size of the blessing. It is the obedience that holds the power. The moment you respond, the pathway shifts. Not always in a way visible to others, but always in a way felt by the soul. A new order is established. A higher alignment is activated. And in that sacred space, blessing is no longer a future hope. It becomes a present reality. Giving to God invites multiplied return. This is not a theory or a metaphor, but a spiritual law that operates with perfect precision. When you give, not from obligation, fear, or manipulation, but from a sincere heart of trust and reverence, you open a divine channel through which blessings flow back to you in greater measure. What you release into the hands of the divine never leaves your life. It is transformed, multiplied, and returned in a form more powerful than what you surrendered. This principle does not depend on how much you give, but on the spirit in which you give. The energy behind the gift is what determines its return. People often think giving must be grand to matter, but in the spiritual realm, size is not the measure. Faith is. A small offering, given in complete trust, outweighs the most lavish gift given from pride or performance. The act of giving to God is not simply a transaction, it is a declaration. It declares that you know the source of all things, that you are not ruled by fear of lack, and that you trust the divine process more than you trust appearances. Every time you give with this consciousness, you affirm abundance, not scarcity. You affirm trust, not control. And what you affirm in spirit must be reflected in form. Giving to God can take many shapes. It can be money, time, love, forgiveness, attention, presence, or service. Anything surrendered in faith becomes sacred in the realm of spirit. It is not the form but the offering of the heart that consecrates the act. When you give your time to listen deeply to someone, you are giving to God. When you forgive someone despite the pain they caused, you are giving to God. When you speak the truth in love, when you tithe cheerfully, when you offer your work in service rather than for applause, you are placing something holy on the invisible altar of faith. And from that altar, miracles emerge. The world teaches that giving depletes. But in divine law, giving replenishes. It does not reduce, it increases. This is why the giving heart never lacks. Because to give in the spirit is to activate the flow of receiving. What you release creates space. What you sow returns. What you offer in love circles back with grace. This is not superstition. This is law. As the farmer trusts the seed to the soil, knowing the earth will do its part, so too must you trust your gifts to God, knowing the universe will return the harvest. The delay between sowing and reaping is only the time needed to prepare you for what's coming. Those who give grudgingly, from fear or to be seen, may perform the action of giving, but they do not activate the law in full. The blessing is tied to the spirit, not just the form. If the heart is clenched, the channel is blocked. But when the heart is open, The giving becomes magnetic. It calls to itself that which is in harmony with its vibration. This is why cheerful giving is emphasized in spiritual teachings. Not because God needs your resources, but because God uses your obedience to open up avenues of grace that could not be reached any other way. Giving is a demonstration of sovereignty. It says, I am not owned by things. I am not afraid of lack. I am governed by spirit. In a world that teaches us to hold tightly, protect ourselves, and keep score, true giving becomes a radical act of faith. It is a refusal to be enslaved by the illusion of separation. It is a way of participating in the circulation of divine energy. The hand that gives remains open, and that openness is what allows the blessing to return. When you give to God, you give into a system that cannot be corrupted, delayed, or denied. The return is not always immediate or visible, but it is inevitable. Some people wonder why their giving seems to produce no harvest, but the question to ask is not only, what did I give? But, how did I give? Was it with resentment? Was it under pressure? Was it with fear? Or was it with joy, with freedom, with expectation of good? Spirit does not respond to obligation, it responds to alignment. When you give with a heart full of faith, even the smallest act is infused with power. And that power multiplies as it travels. What you offer in secret is honored in the open. What you sow in tears is reaped in joy. And what you give in love returns, multiplied in ways you could never predict. Your giving is not a loss, it is a seed. And the seed contains within it the pattern of the harvest. A seed sown in fear will struggle to grow. But a seed sown in faith cannot help but bring forth fruit. The universe is generous by nature. God is abundance itself. And when you give into that abundance, you align yourself with its flow. You become a conduit, not a container. You are no longer trying to hoard blessings, but to circulate them. And the more you circulate, the more you receive, not to keep, but to continue the divine exchange. There is no shortage in the spirit. What you give, God multiplies. The loaves and fishes did not multiply until they were given. The oil did not increase until it was poured. The jar was not filled until it was emptied. In every story of divine provision, the pattern is the same: something is offered in trust, and then something greater is returned. The return often comes in a different form. You may give time and receive peace. You may give finances and receive opportunity. You may give energy and receive healing. But it always comes back, transformed and enlarged. There is a season for sowing and a season for reaping. If you are in a season of giving, do not despair. The harvest is being prepared. Keep giving with a cheerful heart, for in doing so, you are aligning yourself with the source of all. The unseen forces of the Spirit are already at work, arranging people, circumstances, and opportunities on your behalf. Your job is not to figure out how the blessing will come, but to keep the flow open through obedience and trust. To release what no longer serves. To give what you are led to give. And to expect that what returns will be more than you can imagine. When you make giving to God a way of life, you become part of a larger rhythm. You begin to understand that everything you have was given to you not to possess, but to steward. That your gifts are not just for you, but for the world. That your resources, talents, and time are instruments through which divine will can move. And the more you give with this awareness, the more you receive, not for status, but for service. Not for ego, but for impact. You are trusted with more because you have shown that you will continue the flow. And this flow becomes your life. Doubt delays, trust accelerates manifestation. This is a spiritual principle woven into the fabric of divine law. It does not depend on human willpower, time, or effort. It is an energetic truth that governs how quickly or slowly blessings appear in the visible realm. Manifestation is not a matter of forcing something into being. It is a matter of aligning oneself with what is already finished in the spiritual dimension. The moment you believe without wavering, the current is opened. The moment you entertain doubt, the flow is disrupted. Faith is the activator. Doubt is the interrupter. Trust moves you forward. Fear holds you in place. Doubt is not merely a thought, it is an energy. It carries the vibration of uncertainty, of hesitation, of distrust in the divine order. When doubt is present, it signals to the subconscious mind that you are unsure, that you do not truly believe in what you have spoken, affirmed, or prayed for. And the subconscious, being impersonal, cannot distinguish between what is true and what is imagined. It simply mirrors back to you the dominant vibration. If that vibration is rooted in doubt, the result will be delay, not as punishment but as reflection. Spirit does not withhold, but it does wait for coherence. It waits for the soul to come into agreement with truth. Trust is not passive. It is an active force, a deliberate choice to rest in the unseen, to speak with conviction, and to act in alignment even when nothing around you supports the decision. Trust is not dependent on outer confirmation. It does not look for evidence. It creates evidence. When you trust, you are speaking the language of heaven. You are signaling to the universe that you are ready, that you are aligned, that you are no longer wrestling with fear. And in response, what was held back by uncertainty begins to move toward you. This is why those who live in true faith often seem to manifest effortlessly. They are not striving. They are not desperate. They are not pleading with God. They are moving as though the thing they desire is already theirs. They speak it, walk in it, and give thanks for it before it appears. This is not delusion. It is precision. It is spiritual technology. They understand that the inner state governs the outer result, and so they protect their trust like a treasure. They do not entertain fear-based conversations. They do not analyze the how. They do not oscillate between belief and disbelief. They stay steady, because they know that manifestation is a matter of spiritual law, not emotional fluctuation. Doubt scatters energy. It confuses the field. One moment you say yes, the next moment you wonder if it's possible. One day you declare your trust in God, and the next day you let fear take the lead. This inconsistency delays the delivery. The request has been made. The answer is prepared. But the space to receive it has not been fully opened. Doubt closes that space. It blocks the channel. It clouds the signal. And divine law, which always responds to clarity, cannot deliver through confusion. The universe does not force itself into a conflicted heart. It waits for coherence. It waits for harmony between your word, your thought, your feeling, and your belief. Trust, on the other hand, is magnetic. It draws to itself all things in alignment with its vibration. When you trust, your words carry weight. Your actions become declarations. Your emotions support the vision rather than sabotage it. There is no longer a split between what you say and what you feel. You are unified in intention, and that unity creates acceleration. Doors open. People show up. Circumstances align. Not by magic, but by law. The same way a seed bursts into growth when placed in the right soil, the desire manifests when rooted in the soil of unwavering belief. Manifestation is not delayed by God. It is delayed by the soul's inability to fully receive. And doubt is the barrier to that receptivity. It is the subtle voice that asks, what if it doesn't happen? What if I'm not worthy? What if it's too late? These questions, though quiet, carry a powerful energy. They plant seeds of uncertainty that choke the roots of faith. They draw attention away from the promise and back toward the problem. And where attention goes, energy flows. So the manifestation does not come, not because it is denied, but because it is being pushed away by the very mind that asked for it. Trust is not denial of reality. It is deeper recognition of a higher reality. It does not ignore facts. It supersedes them. It does not pretend there are no challenges. It simply knows that those challenges are not the final authority. Trust holds to the vision even when the facts are loud. It sees the invisible. It speaks the unseen. It honors the process. It stays rooted. This rootedness sends out a frequency that tells the universe you are ready to receive. And readiness is everything. Manifestation does not come to those who beg. It comes to those who prepare a space for it with trust. Every great transformation begins with a choice to believe. Not a vague belief in goodness, but a pointed, deliberate trust in the power of spirit to bring forth what has been promised. That promise may come through intuition, through vision, through scripture, or through the deep inner knowing that something greater is calling. But once that knowing arises, it must be honored. Doubt dishonors it. Doubt says, I trust my fear more than my faith. Doubt says, unless I see it, I won't believe it. But trust says, because I believe it, I will see it. This shift in perception changes everything. Some wait for signs before they trust. But signs follow belief, they do not precede it. You declare your trust, and the signs begin to appear. You take the step, and the path becomes clear. You act on the guidance, and the resources meet you there. This is the rhythm of the spiritual life. Movement by faith creates the pathway. Movement by fear creates more questions. The more you wait for confirmation before trusting, the longer the delay. But when you trust without needing confirmation, you bring the unseen into the scene. You become a participant in the creative process, not just an observer hoping for a miracle. Doubt is learned. It is the voice of past disappointment, of conditioned fear, of collective limitation. It is not your original state. Trust is. Children trust naturally. They expect good. They ask and wait, knowing someone will respond. But over time, fear is taught. Scarcity is taught. Separation is taught. To return to trust is not to become naive. It is to become wise in spirit. It is to remember your divine source and your right to receive. It is to step into your inheritance without apology, without explanation, and without hesitation. There is no timeline in spirit. The delay you experience is not punishment, it is preparation. Trust speeds that preparation. It allows you to receive lessons with grace, to grow without resistance, and to stay aligned while the form catches up with the vision. Everything is already finished in the invisible. Your task is to remain aligned with that truth. And alignment means consistency. It means saying the same thing, thinking the same thing, and believing the same thing, no matter what appearances suggest. That consistency, born of trust, is what accelerates the manifestation from idea to reality. Trust is not a feeling, it is a decision. It is something you anchor into every day. When fear rises, you return to truth. When doubt whispers, you speak the promise louder. When the wait feels long, you give thanks in advance. Trust is a spiritual discipline. It is not always easy, but it is always fruitful. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. And the stronger it becomes, the faster the manifestation flows. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped resisting it. Trust creates the environment where miracles are no longer rare. They are natural, expected, and welcome.